Welcome to our training video on Southwest Minnesota Arts Council's Equipment and Facilities Improvement Grants for fiscal year 2025, which runs from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025.
I'm Carolyn Koska, the Grants Administrator for Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. During this training, you'll learn about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, the guidelines for this grant program, the resources that are available for you on our website, how to use our online grant system, the application questions you'll need to answer, and the grant process, or what happens after you submit your application. Check out the chapters below if you want to go directly to a particular topic. For now, we'll start out talking briefly about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council.
Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, or SMOC, is a nonprofit organization committed to promoting and encouraging the development of the arts in the 18 counties of Southwest Minnesota, by serving as a source of funds and technical services which enable local organizations, educational institutions, and individuals to sponsor, create, and promote the arts in their communities. Here is our region down in the southwest corner of the state. We are one of 11 regional arts councils that cover the whole state of Minnesota, working to get state arts funding out into all corners. So most of our funding does come from the state of Minnesota, with an allocation from the State General Fund, but the majority from the Arts and Cultural Heritage or Legacy Fund. We also receive funding from the McKnight Foundation, which we use for our artist grants, and from memberships and donations from around our region. To be a little more specific about our region, applicant organizations need to be located within that region, which includes 18 counties: Big Stone, Chippewa, Cottonwood, Jackson, Candy, Ojai, Lac-qui-Parle, Lincoln, Lyon, McLeod, Meeker, Murray, Nobles, Pipestone, Redwood, Renville, Rock, Swift, and Yellow Medicine, and also 2 tribal nations, Pajutazizi, Upper Sioux Community, and Chanshayapi, Lower Sioux Community. We acknowledge that the SMOC region occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people. Equipment and facilities improvement grants are open to a few types of organizations, including arts organizations, other 501c3 nonprofit organizations with community arts needs, and units of government like city, county, or tribal government with community arts needs. If your organization has been operating in the spirit of a nonprofit but doesn't have its 501c3 status yet, you can apply using a fiscal sponsor, and this would be an organization that does meet our eligibility requirements and who will agree to receive your funds for you and ultimately be responsible for your project. Your application will need to include an agreement between your organization and your fiscal sponsor organization, spelling out how that relationship is going to work. And someone from the fiscal sponsor organization will also need to sign your application. The intent of the Equipment and Facilities Improvement Grant Program is to strengthen mainly arts organizations' capacity to serve the arts needs of their communities. And there are many project types that this could include. Some examples of things that we've seen in the past include sound and lighting equipment, theater curtains and rigging, trapdoors, dance floors, risers, music instruments, kilns or other studio equipment for art classes, different options for storage like shelving or trailers. We've also seen requests for computers, tablets, printers, software that might be more focused on your organization's office, chairs and tables, office furniture, and then multiple kinds of structural improvements, such as improvements to bathrooms, addition of an elevator, new windows or doors, heating or cooling systems, anything related to improving accessibility in your space, signage, etc. If your organization does not own the space that it uses, you'll need to have a cooperative agreement with your facility owner that will outline your ownership of and access to your equipment and improvements. So this would address things like who has keys and access to the space, what happens if your organization moves to a new space, Are you ensured that you would be able to take that equipment with you, etc.? You may likely have a similar agreement with your facility owner, but you would need to attach that to your application. Equipment and facilities improvement grants are available for up to $10,000, and no matching funds are required, which means that as long as your project is within the maximum amount that you can request, your organization will not need to find any other funds toward the project. There are some funding limits involved with this grant program. Applicants can only receive up to $50,000 for equipment and facilities improvement within a rolling 10-year time frame. And then across the board, organizations are limited to a maximum of $20,000 per year in SMOC grant funds, which does not include any operating support you may be receiving from us, but you'll want to keep that limit in mind in planning out your other requests for the year. Some additional things to be aware of as far as eligibility, and the following list is not eligible for these grants: new construction or purchase of real estate, activities of a for-profit project, organization, or business, projects that don't have an art focus, educational projects within a school system. So this program is not open to schools. Also not eligible are activities that take place outside of Minnesota, since we're using state funds. Fundraising events, in other words, the grant should allow your project to break even, not to make a profit. If you are receiving operating support from us, you can't include prorated operating type costs in this budget. Also ineligible are payments of debts that are incurred before the grant begins, using these grant funds as a match toward another grant from us. If you have received a direct Minnesota legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund for fiscal year 2025, and applicants that have past due final reports still outstanding with us. We have one deadline per year for this grant program, and that is January 29th of 2025 for projects starting March 1st or later, and you'll need to submit by 4 p.m. on that deadline date. And note that this is a change from previous years when the time was 4:30 p.m. You'll need to choose a start date for your project, and in doing that, you'll first want to check for the earliest allowed start date for the round you're applying for. You can't start any project activities before that start date, and this would include things like ordering any supplies, holding auditions, doing any advertising, and you can't expend any funds before that start date. If there is something that you would need to pay for before that date, for instance, if you had to put down a deposit on something early, then you could not include that cost in your project budget. You'll also need to choose a project end date. You'll want to give yourself plenty of time to complete the project activities and then also evaluate the project. For instance, if you are purchasing some equipment, you'll want to allow not just for the purchase, but also for some time to use the equipment and get some feedback on that. Also be aware that projects awarded in fiscal year 25 need to be finished up by June 30th of 2026. So that is the latest end date that you could choose. Your project will also need 2 people connected with it. You'll need a project director, and this will be the person who is most directly responsible for the day-to-day activities of the project. And then you'll need an authorizing official, and that is someone who has authorizing power for your organization, like your president or treasurer. These do need to be 2 separate people, and both will need to sign all of your grant documents, including the application. And now we'll go over to our website and take a look at what resources are available for you there. Here we are on our website. Everything that you need will be under this Grants tab, including a login to the grant system, which we'll look at in a little bit. But we also have information about each of the grant programs. So we're going to go over to our grants for organizations. And we'll scroll down to find our equipment and facilities improvement grants. Here they are. And the first thing on that page will be the guidelines for the program. So you'll want to make sure to read through the guidelines. We did touch on some things related to eligibility, but make sure that you do read through this whole guidelines document. The Apply Now button will take you to the grant system. And then we have all of the dates that you'll need to know. We have our application deadline, when the review process and decision will take place, and the earliest date that you can start your project. We have a tutorial video available for this program. Right now it is last year's video, but as soon as the video we're recording at the moment is ready, that will go here. You can also take a look at what live workshop opportunities we have for the coming year. And then at the bottom of the page, we have some materials posted for you. We have the grant guidelines again. We have the application questions available in a Word document. Often people like to work in that Word document first and then paste their answers into the grant system later. We've got information on the scoring criteria, and you can even take a look at the final report questions that you'll have to answer. And now we'll head over to our Workshops and Assistance page. Our Workshops and Assistance page outlines all of the ways that you can get help with your application. We have grant support open office hours on the second Tuesday of each month. You can stop by our office in Marshall from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. While you're there, you can talk through project ideas, sit and work on your application with staff there to answer any questions. Maybe you need some help preparing your work samples or working on a final report, but you can just stop in and get the help that you need. We also have some grants Q&A sessions. There are a series of those in person, so look to see if we are coming somewhere near you, and these will be updated as we have specific dates scheduled. We also have virtual sessions available. You can register for those here. And for both of these, you can learn a little bit about all of the grant programs that are available and then have time to ask questions about your specific project and get those answered. This year we also have a couple of workshops on some specific grant writing topics. First on reaching underserved and underrepresented communities, and then on grant goals and evaluation, so you can check those out. You can easily schedule some time to meet with me. You can just click this link and choose a time on my calendar, and we can meet by phone, by Zoom, or in person at our office in Marshall. And then here are videos of our past workshops that we've had as we are recording our videos for our fiscal year 25 grants. Those will also appear here. There's one more page with resources for you, and that is our credits and resources page. So we've got links to grant credit lines and logos that you may need to be using for your marketing. Then we've got a sample contract, so you can see what that looks like ahead of time. If your organization is using a fiscal sponsor, there's a sample agreement available here. If you're doing a project where you need a cooperative agreement with your facility owner, there's a sample agreement here for that. And then we've also got some accessibility resources here for you. And now we'll head over to our grant system. That brings us to our login page. You can enter your email address and password here if you already have an account in the system. If you are totally new, you can click Create New Account. If you're not sure whether you or someone from your organization already has an account in the system, you can contact us and we can get that figured out for you. But for right now, we are going to log in. And as we first come into the system, a reminder, if you have also worked as a grant reviewer or panelist, for us to remember to switch your role to applicant. And here we are on our applicant dashboard. So this is where you will come when you log in to the grant system. Unless you are coming in for the first time, then you will be brought straight to this apply page. The apply page lists all of the grants that are currently available. So we'll scroll through and find our equipment and facilities improvement grants. Here they are. If you would like to just take a look at the application without actually starting anything, you can click this preview button, but we're going to go ahead and click apply. I'll point out a couple of buttons here at the top before we get into the application. We have Google Translate embedded into the site, so if you would like to work in a different language, you can select that here and it'll translate the interface and all of the questions for you, and you can work in that language. We have the Copy Previous Answers button. If you have done an application in the system before, this will bring up a list of your previous applications to choose from, and it will copy over any answers that are the same between the two applications. We also have the Collaborate button, and this allows you to invite someone to work on the application with you. You would enter their email address here and decide what level of permission to give them, and include a message about whatever it is you would like them to do. If there are some things they need to attach for you, maybe you just want them to proof the application for you, or this is a good way to invite someone like a fiscal sponsor to come in and sign the application. So you would fill this out and click invite, and then they would receive an email and need to create a password to get into the system to work on the application. You'll need a name for your project. There are some examples here. Here's where you'll enter the amount you're requesting. You'll want to wait to do that until after you have filled out your budget. And then we've got some of those important documents linked here again, and some tips as you are working on your application. I'll point out that for most of the fields, the character limit is quite large. We want to make sure you have plenty of room, but we're not expecting you to completely fill that in. So as long as you feel like you have fully answered the question, there's no need to try and come up with more just to fill in that text box. So you'll start out describing your proposed project, explaining what equipment purchases or facilities improvements you're planning to undertake. If you are working with some sort of consultant or contractor, why have you chosen them and what are their qualifications? Who from your organization is going to be involved in the project? And then we ask you to detail the schedule for your project. These next few fields are labeled supplemental materials. They are optional, but they give you some space if you would like to add some technical diagrams, some specs about equipment that you're purchasing, some photos of the space, just any additional information that will help us understand what it is you're trying to do. So there are a couple of places to upload some files. Then this is where you would attach your cooperative agreement with your facility owner if you do not own your own space. We talked a little bit about that earlier. There is a sample agreement here that you can look at, and you can upload that here. Next, you can enter your project start and end dates. And then we come to the budget. You can either create your own budget or you can use this Excel form that we have for you here. And this form will do some calculations for you that can be very helpful. So up at the top, you could enter your organization name or name of your project, and then you can just start listing the costs that you're expecting to have. And we'll put some amounts in here. And you'll see that this is adding for you. Then we have other funding for the project. If you have some donations that are going toward the project or just other organization funds, you can put those here. And then here's where some of the calculations happen for you. It tells us our request cannot exceed $7,700, which was the cash cost, minus the other funding, or the maximum request amount for this grant program, whichever is less. And here's our $10,000 for equipment and facilities improvement. So our $7,700 is less. So that's how much we can request, and you'll see the profit equals 0, which is what we're aiming for. But let's say that the project is a bit more expensive. Now it tells us our request can't exceed $11,700 or the max, whichever is less. So in this case, the maximum of $10,000 is less, so that's what we can request. But now you'll see that we have a negative profit of $1,700. So we will need to come up with the rest of those funds somewhere. Maybe we found another donation, so we'll put that in our other funding. And now our profit equals 0 again. So you would fill this out and save it, and then you can attach it into your application here. A new question that we're asking this year is if you have also applied for or received Minnesota State Arts Board funding for this project. If you have, we ask you to explain that here, but also to include that in the income section of your budget. There is a budget narrative field, and you can add some more details here about items or breakdowns that did not fit into that budget spreadsheet, and just provide a little more explanation here. The next section is all about your organization. So you're asked to provide your mission statement, a brief history, who do you serve, what kind of support do you receive from your community, some information about how your board operates, along with the names and qualifications of your board members. And that board list can either also be entered into this text box or attached in the upload field below. We also ask you to talk about your arts programming. How do you make your artistic choices? How do you make sure that the artists you're hiring have an appropriate level of experience, technical skill, artistic vision, or voice? And how do your projects allow participants and audience to develop knowledge, skills, and understanding of the arts? Next, you're asked to look at who might be underserved or underrepresented in your community. And these groups might be defined by things like race or ethnicity, language, socioeconomic level, ability, etc. And if you are looking for a little more information about your community in order to determine who those groups might be, the Minnesota Compass site can be very helpful. And we'll look up a community here. So for your community that you look up, it's got a lot of helpful facts, some information about age, about race and ethnicity in the community. I'll point out that If you see some data that says suppressed, that's nothing to be concerned about. It just means it's a very small number or has a larger margin of error around that data. But you'll see you are able to get a decent idea about the makeup of the community. You can learn about language, people with disabilities, what kind of housing or transportation is generally available. So lots of information that can help you determine who might be underserved or underrepresented in your community. So once you have identified those groups, you're asked to choose at least one of them to talk about what you generally do to reach out to or involve that group in your activities. There are some examples here of things that your organization might do, whether that's including members of that group in your planning, special admission rates, translating materials, providing transportation or childcare, etc. So what do you do to make sure that those who are underserved or underrepresented are included in your organization's activities? And then finally, how are your activities made accessible to those with various disabilities? Next, you're asked to think about the impact of this particular equipment and facilities improvement project. What are your goals for the project? Might there be some changes to skills, knowledge, attitude, behavior of participants, audiences, or artists as a result of this project? For example, might this strengthen your organization's ability to provide high-quality arts activities? Are there specific programs or events that you're hoping will benefit from this project? And then how do you plan to measure or prove that those changes have taken place? So you'll look for some way that you might be gathering results or feedback. Then what are you looking for in those results that would show you that you'd been successful? So we're looking for actual arts impacts on participants, audience, your organization, beyond just we have now purchased this equipment. And there's a space if you are using some sort of survey, you can attach that here. We also ask for some audience numbers, and there is some guidance there for if this is just an equipment related project. This next section is just gathering some data, and it does not have any bearing on your application. You're asked what is your most recently completed fiscal year, and then depending on your organization type, if you are an arts organization, what were your total expenses for that year? If you are a non-arts organization, what were your estimated annual expenses for the arts during that year? Some demographic information about your organization and the people it serves. Your total audiences for that year entered above. We also ask what opportunities for assistance you may have taken part in preparing your application. Then is a bunch of contact information. You can enter your project director's information, your authorizing official. We ask who the grant writer is in case we have questions that we need to contact you about. Then if you are using a fiscal sponsor organization for this project, and choose yes, some fields will show up for you to enter their information. And here is where you would enter your fiscal sponsor agreement with that organization. If you're not using a fiscal sponsor, that will not show up for you at all. And then we have our signatures. And again, this is a good place to use the collaborate button to invite someone to come in and sign. One last thing, this year we are joining our fellow regional arts councils across the state in a survey about our application processes. So we'd appreciate if you'd answer a few quick questions about how the application process went for you. This does not have any bearing on your application. It will not be seen by those who are reviewing your application, but we just appreciate a little feedback about our process. At the bottom, there is a submit button for when you're ready. We also have the save application button. The system will be auto-saving for you as you are working, but if you click the save application button, it will give you a list of the required questions that you still need to answer. Right now, since we have not done anything, those are all still there, but that will help you track your progress. If you'd like to continue working, you can just hit the continue button, but we're going to go back to our dashboard. So now here's this new equipment and facilities improvement application that we just started. If you want to go back and keep working, you can follow the edit application link. And this is the same place that you would come back to if you're awarded a grant and can find your grant contract and final report. And now we'll head back over to our slides. Now we have some tips for you as you're working on your application. First, make sure to think ahead to choose the best timing for your application. So check out the deadlines and start dates and see what makes the most sense for the timing of your project. Then read the guidelines and criteria carefully. As we mentioned before, we went through most things, but there are probably a few things that are in that written guidelines that we may not have covered. So make sure to take a look at that so that you're not surprised by anything. It's also good to start working on your application early. If you are needing to gather information from other people, if you might have some questions you need time to get answered, just make sure to give yourself plenty of time. Also in the application, you have noticed that a lot of the questions had multiple parts to them, so make sure you are addressing all of those and really answering those fully, that you're not missing any of those pieces. Also, as you're writing, you'll want to keep your answers real clear and concise. As we mentioned before, no need to try and fill up the text boxes if you feel like you fully answered the question. And also no need for any fancy grant language you might think you need. Just using everyday language is fine, as if you're telling a friend about the project. Another suggestion is to not assume that grant reviewers know anything about you or your project. We have reviewers coming from all around the region, so they may not have heard of your organization or be familiar with you as an artist. So be careful about including acronyms without spelling those out, talking about certain programs without explaining. Just assume as you're writing that the person reading doesn't know anything about what you're doing. And finally, we are here to help, so don't hesitate to contact us with any questions. There are multiple ways to get assistance with your application. You can certainly contact us to talk through your project before you're getting started. Make sure you're under the right grant program. Make sure elements of your project are eligible. You can also get answers to questions about the application as you're working on your project. And finally, we can do a review of your application draft before you submit it. If you let us know up to about 2 weeks before the deadline, we can guarantee that we're able to look through your application, give you some feedback, let you know if you're missing anything, if anything might sound confusing to the reviewers. This does not guarantee funding of your project, but we are able to give you some feedback. So another great reason to start working on your application early in order to have time for that part of the process. So what happens after you submit your application? The first thing is that SMOC staff will review it for eligibility and completeness. And if at that stage we find that something is missing or there's an eligibility concern, you'll have 48 hours to fix whatever that is. And then at that point, the group of applications from the round will go on to a panel of individuals from around our region who will discuss and score the applications based on the criteria for the program, which we'll look at in a minute. And then finally, their recommendations go to our board of directors who make the final funding decisions. And that most often just involves taking the applications in ranked order of score and taking the funding down the list as far as the budget goes. Here are the scoring criteria that the panelists will be using to review your equipment and facilities improvement requests. They will be looking at the feasibility of the project, worth 15% of your score, the merit of the organization and artistic quality of its programs, worth 32% of your score, and the impact of the project on your organization, worth 53% of your score. To be more specific, for feasibility, they will be looking to see that you have made appropriate choices for your equipment or improvements, that your timeline and budget are reasonable, and that the personnel involved in the project are capable and have committed to that involvement. For merit of the organization, they will be looking to see what kind of a role your organization plays in the community's artistic development, and in return, what kind of support your organization receives from the community. They'll look to see that your projects and activities have high artistic merit. They'll look to see how you enable those who might be underserved or underrepresented in your community to participate in your activities. They'll look for some efforts toward ADA accessibility, and finally, the overall strength of your organization and governance. For impact, they will be looking to see if the project will strengthen your organization's ability to provide high-quality arts activities in the community. They'll look to see if the project challenges and stretches your organization. They'll also look to see if you have identified proposed changes to take place as a result of the project and have plans to measure whether those changes have taken place. After the panel has completed its scoring, you may also be able to be awarded some additional points if you meet some of the following criteria related to SMOC funding priorities. So if you are a first-time applicant to SMOC, if your organization is led by or primarily serving BIPOC or LGBTQ communities or people with disabilities, or if you are from a county that hasn't received as much funding from us recently. So you could be awarded up to 3 additional percentage points for each of these criteria, for a maximum of 9 additional percentage points added to your score. If your grant is awarded, you'll need to complete a contract, and we saw where those would be located in the grant system a little bit ago. And then payment of your full grant award will be sent to you after the contract is received, and you'll have an option to receive that electronically or by check. You'll need to acknowledge your grant on any publicity or marketing materials that you have. You'll need to include the credit line that can be found in your grant contract, and you might also need to include this Minnesota Legacy logo depending on the source of your funds. But all of these credit materials and logo files, etc., will be sent to you, so you won't have to worry about which options you need to include. And we also looked at the credits and materials page on our website, where some of that information is available also. We understand that things happen as you're working on your project. So if it's looking like you may need to make some changes to your original plan while your project is in progress, contact us and we may be able to help with things like extending your project end date, approving some changes to your budget. So no worries if things change, but just make sure to contact us and get those changes approved. You'll be receiving a reminder partway through your project, checking in to see if anything has changed and what kind of changes might require a project change request to SMOC. You'll have a final report due 60 days after the project end date that you have chosen. So once you start your project, it's a good idea to go into that report and check what information you'll need to be gathering. There are some audience demographics questions, for instance, So make sure to look ahead what kind of information you'll need to be gathering during your project. And that's the last of the information that I need to share with you today.
Thanks for joining us for this grant training. Don't forget to take advantage of the options for assistance as you work on your application. Feel free to contact us with any questions you may have. Good luck!